Okay. Are you able to see the main page, Nasreen? I can. Yes, wonderful. Okay. Just give a few minutes for people to join. Quite exciting. So we have 5 people, I think, who are. Oh, that's going up pretty fast. So Assalamu alaikum to everyone who's joining. I hope you can hear us properly. Nasreen, do you want to just say something so we can just see if we can hear you as well?
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I can hear you very well.
Right.
I think you'll need to put your phone on mute.
Yes, I am trying to. Just seeing how to do that. Yep.
Wa alaikum assalam, Sister Najia, Sister Tahura, Sister Nazifa.
Okay, lovely. Doesn't seem to like me looking at comments.
It's nice to see you too, Sister Najia. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Asma. It's great to be here too.
Right, shall we make a start?
Yeah, I'm happy to make a start.
All right, okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum, beautiful mamas and sisters and daughters, whatever roles we have. Welcome to the Facebook Live, and where today we're going to look at Every Mind Matters, and really about how we can support our children's mental health better, inshallah. So we are so privileged to have this wonderful platform, Muslim Mamas, which is dear to so many of us, so many thousands of us across the world. And it gives me real pleasure to be your host today. So my name is Mahera Ruby. Some of you may know me. Some of you, this will be the first time you're seeing me. So what do? I'm a mother of 3 young men. I'm also a grandmother, alhamdulillah, which means that I have, alhamdulillah, been raised to that station by a lovely young mama herself, my daughter-in-law, who is a joy to have in the house after 3 boys. So alhamdulillah. And in terms of work, I am an academic. I've worked in academia for over 15, well, nearly 20 years. And recently I set up Blooming Parenting, and I've been working in the field of parenting as well for many, many years. But I've set up Blooming Parenting in order to support families and young people to better enjoy their family life, but also become better individuals as well, inshallah. I am really honored to be joined by our lovely guest. And me saying a guest, it puts me on the role of being the chair, or sort of the host. But actually, this is going to be a bit more of co-doing this show together, inshallah. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our lovely Dr. Raihana Nasreen, who is a trainee doctor, who is a trainee psychiatrist with the NHS. And I'll let you introduce yourself a bit more, inshallah, Nasreen.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi, everybody. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Before I start, I just want to say it's an absolute privilege and pleasure to be here. As Sister Mahera mentioned, Muslim Mamas is so dear to all of us, and I'm sure we've all had the experience of 3 a.m. breastfeeding, feeling hopeless and helpless, and then logging onto Facebook, onto Muslim Mamas, and then having the wonderful support of thousands and thousands of ladies who are in the same position. So it's an absolute privilege to. So as said, sorry.
No, go on. Say what you do and.
Yeah. So as Sister Mahera said, I'm a doctor working in the NHS, and I'm specialising in psychiatry. At the moment, I'm working in an adolescent inpatient ward in East London, and that's what I hope to eventually do as a specialty, child and adolescent mental health psychiatry, inshallah. I'm a mum of 3, so I have a 12, 10 and 5-year-old, 2 boys and a girl. I live in London with them, and I also work with a Muslim women's grassroots organisation called Muslimat London that has been around for about 30 years now, around the country. And that's it. That's all I can think of.
Lovely. I'm sure we're going to share more personal experiences and our experiences within our work as well as we go through. So as I said, today's live is about how we can support our children's mental health a bit better. But as we know, it's connected to parental mental health as well. So really, if I can ask you, Nasreen, if you can share with us just a sort of a short overview of what is mental health, what you would describe mental health to be?
So mental health or mental well-being is like an all-encompassing term to describe our emotional and psychological health. And it's a big range. So you can have, so if you think of it as from like mild to severe, you can have in the mild section, you can have things like sometimes feeling a bit nervous or worried, a bit stressed sometimes, a bit anxious. And then you can go along the spectrum to the severe end where you get serious mental illness. So things like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, severe depression, things like that. And this kind of scale is not a fixed. So, you know, if you're in one part of it, it doesn't mean that you're always there. As humans, we change according to our environment, the different pressures that we have, our biological makeup, so we can slide. And what we know is that the things that help us slide back into the mild region are things like social support, spiritual support, psychological support, economic support. So if all of our support networks are working well, we easily slide back into the milder section. And sometimes with the severe mental disorders, you need medication or hospital treatment. And all along that spectrum, there's a big value in things like counselling and psychological therapies. That's what mental health is in a nutshell.
MashaAllah. And really today, the platform is obviously Muslim Mamas. And it'd be, I think, of a lot of benefit if we were to really draw some alignment or how it's viewed within the faith. So in our Islamic faith, is it something that is it recognized? And we know, I mean, Muslim Mamas platform is really well versed in a lot of areas, and we know that it is recognized. But really, how does it manifest in our community? How do we deal with it? What has been your experience in that?
Working as a doctor for many years, and also working in the mental health field in places like Tower Hamlets and Newham and now Havering, where there is quite a significant Muslim population. I think mental health is viewed as quite a stigmatizing area in our community. So we either deny that it exists at all. So we'll say, no, it's, you know, there's no such thing as mental illness. It's something like in possession, or it's bad behavior. Or if we do acknowledge it, we kind of attribute it to a weak iman or weak spirituality and say, just do lots of dhikr and you'll be fine, which certainly is one of the support factors, but it's not the whole story. So there's quite a blanket stigma against mental health in our community, and it's improving. So there's much more awareness, and people like Muslim Mamas are helping greatly in that effort. there is a big stigma.
Mm.
We know that actually as Muslims and in Islam, there's a very rich history of acknowledging mental distress and also trying to find treatments for it. So, if we look back after the Prophet ﷺ, scholars such as Ibn Hazm and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi, they actually categorized mental illness into different categories. And Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi, he did some work on trying to find cures for things like anxiety and depression. And we know that in our morning and evening adhkar, Allah gives us du'as to read, to recite against anxiety, against feeling low. So we've got a rich tradition of acknowledging it, but we've kind of lost our way a little bit in recent times. And when I was talking to you earlier about how the Prophet ﷺ, he acknowledged and labeled his feeling. I don't know if you want to just talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I came across a hadith where Prophet Islam, he was talking to Aisha radiallahu anha, and it was narrated by her, and he was saying to her that he was aware when she was upset and when she was happy with him, and she asked him, "Oh, Rasulullah, how do you know that?" And he responded by saying that when she was happy, she would acknowledge him to be the prophet of Allah. So, Ya Rasulullah, the prophet of people. But when she was upset with him, she would refer to Ibrahim alayhi salam and say, "Oh, the people of Ibrahim alayhi salam." So he knew that she had given attention to Ibrahim alayhi salam instead of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she said, "Oh, Ya Rasulullah, that is not my intention. You are obviously the most important person and being." And I'm paraphrasing this. So it was just that lovely interaction where he was helping her to label and recognize when she was upset. But actually, I just wanted to draw on something else you were saying, and you mentioned that there is a rich tradition of recognizing mental health. But today being a focus on young people, in my interactions with young people, particularly at university and in the community, one of the things that they do say, and you've mentioned this as well, that they don't feel good enough. So this thing about managing expectations, so how religious or not religious enough, you are, is an indication somehow Iman is related to how good or bad you feel, your mental health. And that really is distressing for a lot of young people, actually. So often I get students who come to see me for general tutorial, and it will be around their subject. But actually, as we go into the conversation, it's more about their well-being, how overwhelmed they're feeling. So in terms of how we can seek support, I with Every Mind Matters, I know that NHS has a campaign for young people, actually. Would you talk us through a bit more about the campaign?
Yeah, so this is a brilliant campaign, and it really simplifies the concept, the issue, and it gives us really good tips on, just bite-sized, practical things that we can start doing as soon as we finish this live. It's a really good campaign. So it's the Better Health Every Mind Matters campaign. And really it's aimed at the caregivers of children. So parents, grandparents, foster carers, anybody who has a caring role with children, for children aged 5 to 18 years old. And the focus now for this campaign is due to COVID. So because of COVID and the lockdown, and also the new lockdown that's happening tomorrow, there's been an increase in mental distress and mental health difficulties amongst young people. And during COVID-19, young people have reported the highest, have been the highest population in increase in mental distress, so anxiety and stress. So this campaign is in partnership with the NHS and lots of different charities, so lots of different children's wellbeing and mental health charities have all got together and formulated this campaign. And we can find it on the website. I don't know if it will be put on the comments. So there's a website which you can go on, and it's a really easy to use website. It has the tips of what you can do. So there's 5 tips. Is it 5 or 6? 5 or 6?
Yes, it is. I mean, it is really easy to find. I mean, I went on there, and if you go into the parent section, there's lots of little tabs, and
Yeah,
it's quite easy to navigate. And it really is worth going on there and having a look.
and there's
So
nice links to other websites and charities.
yeah. So in terms of the focus on it being on young people, I mean, I know, we've mentioned taboos and we've mentioned a certain amount of shame being associated with mental health, and often parents struggling not only with their own mental health, but when it comes to their children, it is just as bad sometimes in reaching out for support. So is there a particular reason why the focus is on young people? I mean, you mentioned some statistics around the number of young people, and I know there's another organization, Muslim Youth Helpline, and they've also mentioned that the spike in their numbers, the number of young people calling them for support as well. So it is on the rise. And do you have any other insight why it is important to focus on young people?
Yeah.
I mean, we've
So,
said 3, from as young as 3 to 18.
yeah, from what the advice there is from 5 to 18, but
Oh, okay. Yeah.
transferable. The advice is transferable. So yeah, if we think about what has lockdown and COVID done to our mental health as a nation, it's something that we've never faced before. We've been all pushed into very unusual circumstances. So many of us are working from home. We're all stuck in the home together. It's like a pressure cooker. But the focus has been on young children, because if we think about what the kind of things that they've lost during the pandemic. So for example, children graduating from college to university, they lost that rite of passage of, the end of year prom, getting to see their friends.
Yeah.
Year sixes, they missed their end of year residentials. They didn't see their friends, and suddenly they're in a new secondary school in year 7. They've lost their attachment, so many of them can't see their grandparents anymore. So it's like a big wrench for them, not being able to have their normal interactions. And all of this is experienced by children as loss and grief. So in the same way that we might feel bereaved when someone passes away, all of this in the brains of young children is experienced as a loss, and they grieve for it in the same way. So they go through all of those emotions as well. But the thing is, we don't really acknowledge it as a grief or as a loss. We instead see that they might be playing up, or their behaviours change. They're either quite difficult to deal with, or they've become quiet. So we kind of focus on those rather than going to the root of it and thinking actually this whole situation has had such a big impact. Just to give a story of my children, we all live together. So I live with their grandparents, and they've not been able to, so they don't physically touch them anymore because they work and they go to school. And we've kind of had to swap around our timetables so that when they're at school, they come out and use the kitchen, and they go back into their room when the kids come back. So they haven't been able to hug them. They haven't had the stories. They haven't been able to pray together like they normally do. So all of this is having a big impact on the mental health of children, and it's starting to feel like it's manifesting quite strongly now.
So sometimes certain behaviors we see can be a manifestation of the inner feelings they're not able to regulate. So it's all those feelings of, like you mentioned, the loss and the change. There's a lot of change, and there's also a lot of confusion because things are swapping and changing all the time, particularly in the current situation. So again, it's really not knowing what's going to happen that causes the anxiety in our children. And particularly, I think working with families, I know that working with parents, I know that sometimes it's because we're not able to manage that ourselves, because we're trying to work with the unknown often, and not knowing what to do or how to manage that. A lot of us are working from home, and this lockdown, children are going to school, but actually, depending on how the situation in the school, they might be off for a couple of weeks because they have to isolate if somebody in the bubble has been tested positive. So there is a lot of stopping and changing that's going on. So in terms of, I know the website has a lovely section on the tips that they share, and you mentioned that as well earlier about the 5 tips that can help parents support their children better. And I think it would be really helpful for the mums here if we were to go through them and really talk about how they look like in practice. So it's, sometimes I say to parents, just listen to your children. Really, how do we do that? So I know the first one is be there to listen. What would your take on that be?
Yeah, so that's quite a difficult one because there's listening and then there's actual listening. So sometimes we just, while we're cooking or, doing something else, we have half an ear open. Excuse me. We have half an ear open to what they're saying, and we might just nod along, but we're not actually listening. So being there to listen means actually taking the time and creating a special time where we say it's just you and me, and I'm listening to whatever you're saying, and I'm gonna hear you. And when you do that, then lots of emotions and feelings come out. So this is something that takes practice. So it's quite difficult at first if you're not used to doing it. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And what happens is the children then learn that it's okay to speak about their emotions and feelings, and they get used to it, and it's a normal thing. If you go on the website, it's got another link to how you can start conversations, because I think that's one of the things that we find most difficult. What do we say? We normally end up, so the worst question to ask when a child has come from school is, how's your day? Because where do they start? Do they talk about when Lenny pushed them on the carpet when they were sitting down, or do they talk about the 10-year-old in the playground and the other girls were talking about her? What part of the day do they start? So they end up just grunting and saying, yeah, it's okay. So you don't really get much information. So the website's got some really good tips on how to start conversations. So being quite specific, like what was the best part of your day? What did you like doing the most? Who next to at lunchtime? And I think parents love saying, what did you eat for lunch? But instead of saying, what did you eat for lunch, say, who did you speak to at lunchtime? And if they say it was Mary, say, oh, Mary, okay. And then just let them open up. Try and be as open as possible. Don't ask too many closed questions. Ask a few to get the conversation started, but mostly just nod, repeat back what they've said to you, and acknowledge them. And there's a really nice part. There's a campaign, I think it's from the NHS, which says take 20. So try and I think as Sister Mahera, you can elaborate on that as a parenting coach about special time.
Yes.
Trying to take some time every day.
Yeah, I think it's taking those bite-sized time of about 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes, and sometimes it could be stretching it 20 minutes, but really putting aside some time where you can sit down and do something as a medium to start a conversation as well. So you could be playing a game, it could be something that they enjoy doing, which I think leads on to the next one, which is staying involved in their life. But just on the listening, I was just, while you was talking, I was thinking about the example of the Prophet ﷺ, how he used to give attention to those around him, where they used to feel at the center of his attention, where his whole body would be facing towards them. He would be engaged non-verbally and verbally with whoever he was speaking to. And the relationship between Hadith Jibril, where Prophet Islam and Jibril Islam, how Jibril Islam came and was speaking to him. So that proximity, that closeness, that warmth.
They were touching each other.
They were touching each other.
Were touching her.
Yeah, so these are really lovely examples of active listening, I think, as well, of how we should be. Our posture says a lot when with a child or an adult, but the children read into it quicker than an adult will. They can persevere, whereas a child will get switch off really easily and walk off because they know they don't have your attention. So really to invest in that time. And when you're talking about the 20 minutes thing, I think it's important, again, with the emotions, is playing an emotions game, where you just talk about an emotion that you felt. When was the last time you felt this? Putting lots of emotions on bits of card in a bowl, and taking turns on choosing an emotion and talking about it. The other thing with younger children is looking at just expressions in magazines, in pictures, so in photographs, in pictures, and asking children, what do you think they're feeling? So being able to label feelings is really, really important, and listening to that is incredibly important, I think. So thank you for that one. So the next one
And
is
just to add on that one, it's really important that you let the child lead as well in these listening. Take 20 minutes for listening, rather than you directing. Get the child to pick an activity that they like doing, and then while you're doing the activity, let them lead, and you just reflect on what they're saying. You ask lots and lots of leading questions.
Yeah. Would you kindly go through the other?
Yeah. So the next one is stay involved in their life. So shall we say them all at once and then go through one by one?
Yeah, sure.
So there's be there to listen, stay involved in their life, support positive routines, encourage their interest, take what they say seriously. And there's another one which is support them through difficulties, which is kind of related to the others. So the next one we were talking about now was stay involved in their life. And that's really important because it's quite easy just to get detached from things that they're doing or things that they're going through. And it really links into the being there to listen. So when you're listening, it's really easy. It's good to pick up on things that they're saying, such as they feel left out at school, or like, for example, my daughter came home today and was worried about slavery because she watched a video about slavery and it's really affected her the whole evening. Made her feel sad. And I wouldn't have known that if we hadn't had that chat about what's happened today, etc. So staying involved in their life also links into showing interest in what they're interested in. So not being dismissive. If they say they like something or they want to do it and you don't really agree with it, instead of saying no, don't do that, we don't do that in our family, or we're not interested in that, just listen and communicate and stay involved, because the minute you start being judgmental about something, it kind of pushes them away.
I think sometimes that's really hard for a parent, when I'm just thinking about when you are seeing a child in distress, the instinct is to wipe it better. So it's sort of, honey, it's going to be okay. Tomorrow will be a better day. And really, it's the benefit is in actually being able to sit in the emotion with the child, and not try to plaster it. And I think that's really important. So being involved in their lives, I guess what it does is, makes them feel that they're part of you're taking interest, but also you're coming down to their level. And I think that becomes more and more important actually as the children get older, because they don't tend to come to us with young teenagers or adolescents. They don't normally come, and if you ask them how they are, it's a shrug of a shoulder. It's just going to their room. So really being involved in their life is to just check in on them sometimes as well, and to be able to ask the second time, are you actually okay? Is there something that I can do? Is there, so being able to prod them a little bit and nudge them in that direction it's
What
really
could be a practical? What could be what's a practical way of a family? Say, for example, if they have 5 children or 4 children, how can the parent stay involved in all of their lives? If one of them might be at college, one's at school, one's a toddler. What practical things can they do as a family to, for the parents to be able to stay involved in their life? I know you're a big advocate of family meetings. I don't know if that's one of the things that could help with.
Yeah. So I do believe that really helps, because when you come together as meal times are fantastic. So in COVID situations, we have that ability to do that more often, maybe eating together where there's free flow of conversation, and being able to just gratitude circles. I know a lot of parents have said that they benefited so much from just sitting together after prayer and salah, and being able to say, what are we grateful for today? So one of the salah maybe is just to be able to sit down and just spend a few minutes while everybody's together, and grab that moment. I am conscious of time, so if we and we've got some questions we need to get through as well, which leads us nicely actually onto supporting positive routines. So the importance actually of having routines when
Mm.
possibly it's so difficult to have one,
Yeah.
is important for children's mental health and well-being.
Yeah, it's like an anchor for them, isn't it? So, especially during coronavirus and COVID, so much is out of control. We don't know when there'll be a vaccine. We have no control over our free passage outside. We can't go to shops. They can't do all the normal things they do. Everything feels like it's spiraling out of control. There's so much going on. So, if you anchor them with a positive, regular routine, then they refocus, and it's time, it helps them have a balance to their day, and there's anchors where they have regular contact with you as their caregiver throughout the day. And children, in every parenting course you'll go to, one of the antidotes for behavioral challenges is setting good boundaries and good routines. It's the mainstay of, it's the basis, it's a bedrock of parenting.
Consistency and being
Exactly.
consistent. Yeah. Yeah.
And because when you don't give children a routine and when you don't give them a boundary, they feel uncontained.
Mm.
Plays out in their emotional dysregulation, in their behavioral dysregulation. And that point goes nicely onto
Encouraging their interests.
encouraging good sleep,
Mm.
which is part of their routine, because the sleep time is when their brains reset and refocus. There's been lots of studies on how you make serious mistakes when you're not sleeping. You're more anxious, your mood is lower. So all of these things are affected by poor sleep. So as part of that positive routine, it's really important to have good sleep.
Mm. And that's again very closely linked to the advice we're given Islamically as well, that the night is to rest
Mm.
and the day is to work. So really having that clear boundary of when it's time to work and when it's time to sleep. Yeah, so that's really helpful. Encouraging their interests.
Encouraging their interests is the next one. And that's, again, it's just another opportunity for you to check in with them. And again, it's hard when you've got lots of children and one wants to be a netball champion, the other one wants to do chess, and the other one wants to do Pokemon. But always validate what their interests are and try to encourage them in their hobbies. I read this really nice article a couple of years ago about how you can raise the station of a child in the family by making them an expert at something. So, so in your family meetings, for example, you can say Musa is the expert in origami, and Sophia is the expert in tidying up. Just giving them that role and that responsibility, and then, and they feel that you're interested, and then they'll feel more able to open up to you as well.
Mm. And I think we've covered the last one, taking what they say seriously and not brush things off. And I think there's some questions coming up on the chat as well. It might be worth actually looking at that. And I believe I saw a question: how parents, how should we behave so that the children cannot, I guess, become part of our anxiety. And how do we do that, because parents are also anxious at the same time, so we are human as well. So I think from that angle, we also need to do things to regulate our emotions. We need to take time out, we need to be able to step back, we need to be able to do something that we have interest in. So some of what's being said for the children, actually we need to implement in our own lives as parents, so that we can model that behavior to the children, and they will possibly sign up to what we ask them to do if they see us doing it. So it's really about the modeling, regardless of what I say in theory. In practice, there will always be some anxiety that we will always have as parents. but it's also being able to give children a reasonable explanation for what is happening, and that things are trying to be managed. So taking that responsibility away. But as Muslim parents, being able to have tawakkul, I think that sometimes the anxiety comes from trying to control tomorrow, trying to control what might happen tomorrow, and being able to have everything in our control, which we don't actually have. So being able to have that tawakkul, handing it over to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and saying to the children, we know we've tried our best, now let's leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So moving on to questions. So some of the questions let's start with, there's quite a few around gadgets. It sort of, parents have said it's addiction to screen time, really, and how that can increase the anxiety in a child, because if you're trying to get the child to do something and they stuck to their devices, what advice would you give to the parents, I guess, in order to ease that a little bit in terms of the screen time that the children have?
It comes down to family rules, doesn't it? So if we go back to what we said about having a regular family meeting, and when you have family meeting, you all have a role and you all have rules. Every family has rules. When you can set boundaries and rules and chores, and everyone buys into that, so everyone agrees to it as a family, when you stick to it and you're consistent, then that creates a harmony, and everyone, even though they might moan, at the end of the day, they know that they agreed to it in the family meeting. So if you set rules about when should screen time be, when do we put it away, how often, and what the consequences are for, not listening. If the consequences you don't get screen time, then you have to follow that through as a parent, and the child has to agree. And they will be cranky at first when you take it away, but as time goes on, it'll get better. I actually had a teaching today on screens and gadgets and gaming.
Right.
Interesting, because I think our instinct, especially as Muslim mums, is to say no screen time at all. And, all gadgets are bad, we don't want it at all. But there's been quite a lot of research that shows, so we've all seen the research that shows that it's like cocaine on the brain, it's addictive, it creates anxiety and depression, and it's related to worse mental health. But actually the design of those studies were problematic. They weren't designed very well. And there's recently been more studies that have been done. And what they've shown is if you have the spectrum of no screen time and no interaction with gadgets at all, and excessive screen time and excessive access to gadgets, those two extremes do account for worse mental health and concentration. But the middle ground, where there's a moderate amount, doesn't have any link to poor mental health. So there's that, our grandparents, there's a saying that, the older generation say is everything in moderation and a little bit of what you like. So we can relate that to food, but if we relate it to screen time, let's be moderate, give reasonable amounts of time, maybe more at the weekend, maybe none on school nights, because they do get a lot of screen time in school as well. And set those rules as a family and agree to it, and maybe draw up a contract. And the other type of studies show that what you do in screen time has a big effect on your mental health.
It's what you're doing on there.
Yeah, if you're flicking through social media constantly, you can get very anxious. But if you're doing Minecraft, for example, a lot of mums are going to be like, no, don't say Minecraft is okay. But, if you're doing strategic games, for example, it can actually help you with strategic thinking, etc.
So the key thing here is about moderation.
Routines and boundaries.
Yeah. And I'd just like to draw that back for the parents as well. If your children are constantly watching you or us flicking through mindlessly through, our phones, and then we're asking them to get off their screens, it's not going to end well. With the younger children, they may listen, but with the older children, they'll roll their eyes and they'll just carry on, because you're doing exactly what you're asking them not to do. So again, it's really, I guess what sometimes it comes across as, are you asking for perfection in a household? But actually, it's really to work towards something that's manageable, and a lot of parenting, I think, is being able to be flexible. We've had a bad day today, but you know what, tomorrow we can try better, rather than it all being doom and gloom, and there's no hope for tomorrow. So really, it's that positivity that's really important as well. And we've had bad days where we need to give the screen to the kids, and they just need to get on with things while I recuperate. So there's a balance I think we need to have. One of the questions, Nasreen, here is that lockdown. Okay, so my teen son was a victim of cyberbullying, and it is not enough for him to just switch off and report to the police. It is really affecting his confidence. Although I have reduced his screen time and have kept an eye on it, he is acting out in aggression. And now I know it still bothers him. So I'm not sure how to reach out to him, because every time I go to talk to him, he shuts down and refuses to speak. So with cyberbullying, the that's on the increase as well, because of the type of learning we've been having because of lockdown. So is there anything that you can offer here in terms of a way of thinking, maybe, or how we can support our children when they're going through something like this?
Yeah, there's two things there. One is that the opportunity for cyberbullying to happen, and there's that that you can't ever eliminate it completely, because it'll always find a way to get back to the child. But one of the ways that it can be reduced is if you have a amnesty every evening, where all family members hand in their devices,
Mm-hmm.
like a central charging station, maybe in the sitting room or the kitchen, and you as parents also follow the rule. After a certain so after school, all the children give their devices in, and then they get it back the next morning. That protects them from looking at what's going on Instagram and Snapchat and what's being said about who, and getting sucked into that environment.
Mm.
You'll find them on their phone 3 a.m. at night, replying and seeing all of this is happening. It's a very big problem amongst adolescents. And the second
Mm.
is, how do you get him to open up? And that's like a work in progress. And I think Sister Mahera will be better at taking us through this. But it's about that special time, isn't it? And the community
Yes, it is.
you build
Um,
first.
Yeah, and also what sort of mindset we go into that conversation with. So, am I going into that conversation with with some assumptions about what I think will help my child, or what I think they're going through? And really, for a parent, it's so. And I always say this to parents, just imagine this was somebody else's child. How would you approach it? If you imagine your teenager to be somebody else's teenager, my teenager, I'm handing over to you to have this chat around cyberbullying, how would you approach it? It would be very, very different to the way we approach our own children. We're more considerate, we're more compassionate, we're less judgmental. And naturally, being a parent, our anxiety level goes up watching our own child in pain, rather than same level when it's somebody else's child. But really, it really does help us to be neutral and objective when we go to speak to that child. But also sometimes it's just creating that silence, that comfortable silence when you go into a child's room, and just being able to sit with them. And then they might ask you, why are you here? But then, you're able to say that, look, I know something's bothering you. Take your time, give them the space so that they can, and let them know where you are so they can find you. So, wherever you are, meaning your availability emotionally, and physically, that you're going to be available for them. So yeah, and again, as Nasreen mentioned, that special time. So young people knowing that, and I always compare it to tahajjud. So if you think about tahajjud as an example, where that time, the third portion of the night, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guarantees that he's going to come down to the lowest heaven and wait for us with all the angels there to listen to us, regardless of the number of sins we might have committed, the wrongs, the whatever it is. He doesn't change that. And every individual has a choice to take that up or not take it up. And those who do it regularly, and turn to Allah, they feel a more connected tranquility than somebody who goes whenever they're in trouble. So I relate that to special time. Often we tend to have these meetings with our children when there's something that's gone wrong.
Mm.
And really, the outcome of that isn't as great as if you consistently say to a child, whether you come or not, Sunday at this particular time, that's our time, and that's where I'll be. So that they know that oh my God, she did turn up actually. She was in the living room just waiting. And so after a while, they get, it sinks into them, right, they are there. And that bond, that knowledge is so important for them. Just as we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there during Tahajjud time, you know, that's an example that I tend to use just to show the kind of availability we need to have for our children when it comes to regulating and being able to come and talk to us.
That's such a beautiful example. And it actually reminds me of a conversation I had with you about how we can find avenues for connection with our children. And you told me a story about there was a family you were working with, and they were, you know, similar to this boy who doesn't want to talk about the cyberbullying and closes up.
Yeah.
The mum was at her wit's end of how to connect with her son. And then it eventually transpired. So, you were just problem solving and looking into their family. And it transpired that this son or daughter, that the child would come for dinner every single day at the table. And how wonderful, is so rare, but this is your opportunity for connection because they're willingly coming. And in every family, there'll always be one place where you'll see they'll come or they'll be there, where other times you find it difficult to connect with them. So grasping those opportunities where they're with you, and always starting off with problem-free chat. So don't go straight into the problem first. Talk about their new trainers or the weather or something else first, and let them feel at ease, and then start the difficulty.
So I have another question here, and I'm conscious of the time. So there's so many questions. Actually, if we don't get to answer it during the show, we will try to address them after, inshallah, in the comments.
We'll answer them on the comments on the live.
Yeah. So I have a question. He says, I'm worried my 9-year-old daughter is developing an attachment to food. She constantly wants to eat and seek food for comfort. She's currently overweight, and I'm worried she will become obese. I don't know if I've made her feel like this by wanting her to be herself. She always gets teased by family members, and this really saddens her, despite mom's efforts to make this stop. So, relationship with food. So where do we seek our comfort?
I think a lot of us do eat our emotions. When we're feeling sad, we'll have a cake. When we're feeling happy, we'll celebrate with cake. Whatever the emotion, it always leads to cake. I think, again, it goes back to family rules and boundaries and what you have in the house and what example you set as a parent. And sometimes you do all of that and it's difficult, but that's a good place to start. So making sure that you model healthy eating, you model healthy exercise. I think at the start of lockdown, it was great because whole families were doing Joe Wicks together. There was also a lot of baking happening, but just choosing, maybe sitting down at the beginning of the week with them and doing a meal plan and saying, we're going to have this for dinner on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Let's do a shopping list. If you do online orders, get them to fill the basket with all the ingredients they need. Look at cooking books. So, getting them involved in every aspect of it. And then while you're doing that, talking about, so these are the different food groups. And this is what a balanced meal looks like. This is what happens to our body. And talking about the need for food as fuel rather than as a entertainment. So we need food so that we can live and be active and do the things we need to do. It's not an end in itself. So, just having those conversations about healthy eating, moving, and really getting them involved in it. So
it just takes me back to, the 5 tips that we were looking at, taking interest in something that they have interest in. If they are showing an interest in food, like you said, getting them involved in the process and the shopping. So it does relate back to, rather than focusing on it as an issue, is to make it an event, and really involving the child in that event of how wonderful food can be actually, and the joy
also
that
just a note of caution. So if she's 9, she's probably on the cusp of puberty and is probably very hungry because she's growing. She's having a growth spurt. And what normally happens with girls when they reach puberty is they'll eat because they're hungry. and they might look like they're a bit chubby, so the puppy fat that people talk about, and then they'll grow out of it, so they'll grow taller and leaner. So just a word of caution, and not just giving her lots of healthy choices, have lots of salads and fruits and vegetable sticks, and make sure all the food choices are healthy, and then let her eat as much as that as she wants, obviously not and have set meal times and routine. But just a word of caution, not to restrict too much when they're 9, because they are growing, and belly fat and hip fat is normal
Yeah.
age.
There's a few other questions that actually revolves around parental conflict. So it being COVID and the intense interaction that we have. So everybody, and I can see that happening in this phase of the lockdown as well, that parental conflict can have an impact on well-being of the child. Yeah. So really, how do we manage that in this closed space? And not everyone's privileged to have space. So it could be quite a small space that everyone has to live in, work in, study in, and really play in. Everything's happening within the bounds of the house. How would we as parents, I mean, what would your advice be to the parents in terms of what they say to the children? I mean, I know as giving advice to the parents is that you've got to manage, and it's really important that you really are conscious that it doesn't have an impact, whether you're having it in the bedroom, the conflict, or in front of them. It kind of has a similar effect. They still worry, they're very anxious, and it really has an impact on them. But in terms of what we can say to the child, what would your advice be?
I think if you have felt like you've been snappy at your child, and or have shouted at them, or have been overly stressed with them, the best thing as a parent we can do is to acknowledge it with them and say sorry, and say, this is not an excuse, but it's a reason that I've been feeling stressed for this, and I should have dealt with it like this, but I didn't, and instead I shouted at you, and I'm sorry. Because that's such a powerful modeling for the child in how to own up to mistakes and how to repair them with other people. So the way you do it with your child is how they will then go out and do it with their work colleagues or at university or at school. So that's really important, acknowledging it and acknowledging the distress and apologizing. That's really important. Did you mean about the other parents' bad behavior?
There's one question on that actually, but just on this one, as you were saying that, it's really important to be conscious of giving age-appropriate explanation to the children. I know often what parents end up doing is kind of seeking therapy from the children. So sometimes they become our carers, emotional carers. So what we do is we tend to offload onto them, saying that I'm really sorry. So the guilt that we feel, we often say to the children, it's really important how you say sorry, and the language that we use, because otherwise what the children then go away with is a sense of worry that, am I supposed to be doing something? Is there, what is their role? So that clarity needs to be given to the children, that it is adults who are struggling. It's not to do with you. They are loved. They are. So that security is really important for them to know that it's there in the home. Just on that, there is a question that says, well, the question here is, let me just see. Sorry. So, has anyone else's child become super shy? I wouldn't even say shy, but almost scared to talk to anyone. My daughter used to be feisty, loud, somewhat crazy, but now she's like a mouse. Her teacher has noticed it noticed it too, and asked if anything was happening at home. Alhamdulillah, we've had no changes. No one has been sick in my extended family, and she sees regular friends at school. So she seems to be in her own world now. And when I ask her to do anything, she's reluctant and says she can't do it, or too scared to. Is this normal for an 8-year-old?
I think there's such a variance in what's normal and the different stages that children go through.
Yeah.
Again, it comes back to that trying to get that connection, and finding finding out what's bothering them and if there is something bothering them through the special time. So just trying to find time every day to explore what's worrying her, what is it, what is it that she fears, because again, this could be the effect of being under lockdown and all the uncertainty that's going on in the world. Some children take their emotional distress externally, so that it involves in more fights and aggressiveness to others. Some children internalize it, so it all goes back into them, so they start worrying about everything quietly. There's some things that you can do practically. So you mentioned earlier about gratitude. So as a family, have an attitude of gratitude. So make this like a regular occurrence in your house, where maybe at dinner time or in the morning before they go to school, or just before bed when you're tucking them in, you quick fire some things that you're grateful for, and you model it. So, as a mum, you can say, Today, I'm grateful that we all got out of the house in time. I'm grateful that we had a lovely dinner, and I'm grateful that the car started and that frost didn't, affect the engine. So, you're teaching them to be grateful for each and everything that is happening in their life, and then you invite them to be grateful. So you say, what are you grateful for? What went well today? So when children start refocusing their emotions from the negative onto the positive, by thinking of gratitude and linking it to Allah. So as Muslims, when we do attitude of gratitude, we always link it to Allah. And Allah says in Surah Ibrahim, if you are grateful, I will give you more. So remind the children, the more we're grateful, the more that Allah will return to us. So that's one of the things that you can do to help with anxious feelings in children. And the other really powerful thing, which everyone says has roots in Buddhism, but actually has very strong roots in Islam, is mindfulness. And there's lots of stuff out there on the internet, that teaches you how to do mindfulness. Just being there with the feeling, acknowledging it, and noticing. So sometimes when children get quite panicky and anxious, just on the spur of that moment, is saying, do some deep breathing, won't work really. So it's something that you have to practice and do it as a thing, as a family. But sometimes an emergency thing you can do if they're getting really panicked is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, where you say, you just hold them and you say, okay, what are 5 things that we can see? I can see a pile of laundry in this room, actually. A pile of laundry. I can see a dog. I'm a Muslim mama. I can see a bookshelf. What 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. So it just grounds them. So emergency thing you can do. But for the longer term, doing mindfulness techniques, so helping them with their breathing, and helping them be in the moment, so that they're not worrying about the past or the future. What anxiety and sadness is. Anxiety is worry about the future, and sadness is worry about the past. There's that you can do to help your 8-year-old, inshallah.
And I love that example, actually, because it made me think about khushu, so that mindfulness, that centering, how we center ourselves so that we can focus on what is important in that moment. And I remember using the idea of a puppet. So if you imagine yourself to be a puppet, and somebody's holding the string. So if you imagine that string is actually going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and every time you're grateful for something, you just, straightening up a little bit more, straightening. So the connection, the distance between you and Allah is closer. So the khushu becomes more and more attuned to what it is that we are focusing on. So the attitude of gratitude is really, really powerful if you can center that on something that's greater than yourself. And for us, we know that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And really, when you do that exercise with the children, that you notice them sitting up as well. And one of the things that I think really helps children to be able to praise them. And I know a lot of what we're saying today is actually, for many of us, it's really difficult because our cultural experiences are different. We've been taught, some of us are not very huggy-feely people. Some of us are not very talkative. So if we are suppressing our own feelings, it's not going to come to us easily to be able to talk about emotions with our children. So I don't want to, create a sense of overwhelm with the parents, with the mums that are listening in, because really it's being able to do what you can. It's what's within our capacity, and that's where we need to start. Because if you're thinking, oh my God, these wonderful mamas that go off and do these mindfulness stuff, and then they're going on doing this khushu and this and that, and I'm not, I can't, and it will really create a lot of anxiety and overwhelm amongst us, and that's not the intention of today. What really is the intention is that to be mindful of what we can do, work towards, but to start off where we can. And I think that's really important to acknowledge that we're all at different stages, we're all in different contexts, we're all different situations and family setups. So we really need to um, uh, be mindful of that, be conscious of that. And that's where the website is really, really helpful. So I just want to move on to actually, where can parents actually reach out and seek support when things are going a bit pear-shaped, and they need to find out a bit more? Obviously, we've mentioned the Every Mind Matters website, and really, I can read out the website, and I think it's in the chat, but I won't remember. So really, when you're just Google Every Mind Matters NHS, it comes up. And if you go into the parent section, go through the whole website. It's brilliant. If you go to the parent section, you'll come across what we've talked about today, the 5 tips of listening to the children, being more involved in their lives, supporting positive routines, encouraging their interests, and taking what they say seriously. They do go in, there's lovely videos there you can watch. So each one will break down into other things. Besides that, do you have any other suggestions where parents can reach out for support?
Yeah. So there's the Muslim Youth Helpline, um, and they're fantastic. They have trained professionals on the phone for help with matters like this. Um, if it's a bit more of a bit more of a serious problem, you can always go to your GP and they can refer to CAMS, which is Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. And schools are a brilliant resource. Lots of schools have in-house counsellors, and they have organisations like Place to Be, which is like a children's counselling service, which they can be referred to. So they'll come to the school and see the children. And the Maudsley charity also has got lots of really good stuff about young people on their website. There's actually a link from the Every Mind Matters website to the Maudsley charity. And they've got like videos by actors like Ramesh Ranganathan and comedians who do the voiceover. So it's really listenable, accessible, and the tips are great there. And apart from that, yeah, so GP, school, Muslim Youth Helpline, and the Every Mind Matters website, and the NHS website itself.
Yeah. And I think part of that is actually removing the shame from what we think is mental health, and how we will be viewed. There's always this stigma attached to it, as we started the session with. And as Muslims, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran that we have been made anxious. Yeah, we have been made anxious, and he goes on to say that in Surah 70, I think, he goes on to say that when things are good, we're not grateful. When things are not so good, we go on the rant. Kind of, this is a serious paraphrasing here, but the gist of it is that we don't remember to be grateful. However, we have been made anxious, and really the anxiety is from focusing on the negative. And it's not to say that we shouldn't and just brush it aside, but really how we can make the environment in our homes a bit more positive, a bit more and I'm really conscious of what I'm saying, because I know the difficulties that so many families are in, where they have very troubled teenagers, where they have very troubled youngsters, probably a very difficult partner. So that things are really, really tough. And that's why it's really important for parents to be able to reach out and seek that support, because if we don't, then we really do pass it on to our children. And one of the questions that actually came earlier was one of the teenagers, I think the son had run away. And alhamdulillah, he's okay, he's with his grandparents. But the mum is really, really anxious. How does she broach that conversation? And it was because he doesn't feel safe at home due to a breakup between the parents. They've reconciled now, but he still doesn't want to come home. He doesn't feel that the home is a safe space. So really, when we think about emotions and how we regulate those emotions, it's being able to acknowledge that whatever we do as adults has a real impact on children, even those who are still in our tummies. Yeah, so that they do absorb a lot of that emotion. So our task really, I think, from today's session is to be able to help them, first of all, label what those emotions are, often asking them where do they feel it, where are they feeling those emotions, and then being able to simply just ask them, what is it that I can do to help you? What is it that mommy can do? What is it that daddy can do? What is it, whoever the elder is speaking to the child, how can we help? Is there something we can do to help? And most importantly is not to feel embarrassed seeking professional help. There's no shame in it whatsoever, because at the end of the day, no one else is going to come and rescue us. We need to act on it and seek that support for ourselves. Just before we end, is there anything else that you would want to add to this, to the conversation?
Just to re-emphasize the point about, as parents, we need to be okay in order that our children are okay. So, a lot of this might feel difficult because we're not in a position to offer that support. So we also need to find the avenues to find that support and help ourselves, if it's through our social networks, or if we need to go to the GP or contact, arrange some counselling for ourselves. Very important that our cup is full in order that we can give. We can't give from an empty cup. And lastly, just to remember as Muslims that Allah is the ultimate controller of everything, and He loves us the most, and whatever He does is for our benefit, and He's the one that we should turn to first. And He tells us that with every difficulty there is also ease. So it's not after, it's with. So any difficulty that we're going through, there are glimpses of ease alongside it as well. And we all should pray for each other that we all experience that ease, inshallah.
Inshallah. Well, we've kind of come to the end of the show, end of the program, and I just wanted to thank everyone who's managed to join us on today's live. Most important to Muslim mamas for having the ingenious idea to host this. So alhamdulillah. And really, again, just to highlight that the support that is available on the NHS Every Mind Matters website, do go and seek it out. It's really is helpful. And I just wanted to end with a dua, if that's okay. I'll end it. I'll read it out in English, and it's in Ahmed. It's a hadith narrated by Ibn Masud, who reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that, "O Allah, I am your servant, the son of your servant, the son of your maidservant. My forelock is in your hand. Your command concerning me prevails, and your decision concerning me is just. I call upon you by every one of the beautiful names with which you have described yourself, or which you have revealed in your book, or you have taught to any of your creatures, or which you have chosen to keep in the knowledge of the unseen with you, to make the Quran the delight of my heart, the light of my chest, and to remove my sadness and dispel my anxiety." So with that, I just wanted to end the program. Thank you so much, Nasreen, for helping me and joining this live. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and I definitely have learnt a lot from your input. Alhamdulillah, may Allah preserve you and protect you at all times, inshallah.
In the same
And once again,
I've learned a lot.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So once again, thank you to all the mamas. Thank you for all the questions and the comments and lovely words of encouragement that's come through on on the chat as well. And we will both try to respond to questions that we haven't been able to address during the program. So take care of yourselves and take care of your families, take care of all our mental health, and we're all whole beings. So whether you start off with the physical and then the emotional and then the mental and the spiritual, wherever it starts, we are whole individuals with all those parts in one. So inshallah, may Allah help us all to stay safe, stay well, and I don't know what else to say. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu
Subhanakallah.
alaikum.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.